Everybody, we're here for Tuesday, February 11th work session of the Board of County Commissioners, Pickens County. Most of our agenda today is regarding the landfill, and we're starting off with a landfill master plan overview. Kathy Hull and Brian Pettit are here to present us a lot of information.
All right, thanks, Rob. So yeah, we're here because the Solid Waste Center is projected to make some significant changes and improvements over the next several years. So we're here to present today a 5-year kind of solid waste initiative plan to kind of give you an idea of where everything's going, finances, layouts, that sort of thing. So what we're looking to change is going to include improvements to services and products we offer at the Solid Waste Center, as well as an integrated waste management system of all activities in the landfill that are interrelated. So for example, composting and recycling keep waste from entering the landfill. In addition, wastewater treatment system will provide a cost-effective disposal service for residents of the Roaring Fork Valley, and as well as provide much-needed water for landfill uses and biosolids for the compost program. And then we're also going to look at the landfill expansion option to add about 10 years of life onto the landfill. So this goal of the 5-year initiative is to create an economically and socially sustainable strategic plan that will serve the needs of Pickens County for the next 10 years, with lasting effects for the remainder of the life of the Solid Waste Center. So our plan objectives include increasing the life of the landfill, as I mentioned. And here with me today we have our solid waste engineering consultants, Weaver Booz, John Breest, and Jeremy Welch. Here to answer any technical questions that may come up in regards to that. Also, another goal is to reduce landfill waste and increase materials collected for recycling and diverting waste from the landfill, utilizing and growing the on-site composting program, as well as privatizing the county's recycling centers to single stream collection, which we've discussed and gone through an RFP process. And then again, also expand the services offered to the residents through a wastewater septic treatment system. So the focus of this plan, again, landfilling, expansion compost operation, installation of wastewater treatment, and relocation of the shooting range, which will come at the end. We've also attached this 5-year initiative plan that details our aforementioned projects, including multiple 10-year budgets, site layout plans, and timelines for completion. So we've prepared a PowerPoint presentation, I guess, to get us started and walk through. Let's see, we've already gone through the introduction. Right in the back of your head.
No, I'm going to move. I don't always move, but this one's got some length to it, so okay. I'm going to sit over here.
In April 2010, the Solid Waste Center Master Plan was amended. The original was completed in June of 2004. The amended Master Plan includes preliminary approval for the installation of a wastewater treatment system, but not for a landfill expansion. This is the original diagram of the master plan that was done in April 2010. I'm going to have to turn my presentation because I cannot read that. The original 2010 amended master plan included some things that aren't relevant anymore. There was the installation of the single stream materials recovery facility, which was shelved. It was never approved. It never went forward because of costs. They also had a landfill expansion area designated over here that is not functional and not usable, so we're going to remove that. The optional shooting range location was moved up here, and we'll continue with that placement. And then another big area is the compost, current composting operations and the expansion of the compost pad area. This is our current center solid waste proposal as we're going to look at it now. We have 2 options for the septic system placement. One is where the current shooting range is located. And then our other option is over into the boneyard area, what we call it's off to the side of the landfill. And to give you an orientation, this is Route 82. You come up the landfill, the gatehouse area and scale are in this area. The shooting range remains in the same location. This area is the proposed landfill expansion, and then the current existing compost operation, as well as the expansion of the composting. And now we get into the 10-year budget savings plan, as well as costs. And I'm going to ask if Connie can come up and kind of
the old version.
Total cost, and what we handed out.
Is there this slide before that?
Yes.
Okay. So you have two sets of 10-year plans presented here. And they show two different viewpoints of how to look at the numbers. The first one that you're seeing shows, for the most part, a comparison. Well, it's a little bit mixed.
Do you want to maybe hand out this, because we don't have the second one in our packet.
We have the one that just says 10-year budget plan, but not savings. At least on that page.
Okay.
It's just hard sometimes to look there. I don't know.
Well, we should.
This is the one that this is the one that's the same as the one in our packet. This one is the different one, the total cost.
Let me run and make copies.
Yeah. We've got the first one. It's the one that says total cost that we don't have, and I think it explains things a little bit better.
Well, why don't we talk about that one, the one that's in their packet, while Brian's making the copy.
The one that's in the packet is a little bit blended between what is already in the budget and what would be a proposed new budget. So in the landfill expansion 10-year plan, the first year's expenditure of $67,500 is already included in the existing budget, as are the revenues in the out years. But it does show the cost in 2015 of the cell and liner construction, so that's the major capital expenditure. This orange area gives you a snapshot, though, of the overall cost over a 10-year period for implementing the landfill expansion. What it does not show you is the long-term savings or the long-term advantages to the landfill of having the extra space. And Kathy, do you have numbers to quantify that?
Mm-hmm. Currently, the landfill has 25 years of life on it as we do operations today. The 10-year expansion, again, will give us 35 years of life. We presented back on November 12th 3 options, and we're going to recommend the 10-year expansion. So again, goals are to increase the site life and also increase the working area for the compost operation. It includes 8.5 to 9 acres of additional space, with construction of a subgrade leachate liner collection system. The additional revenues projected for that 10 years are $12,400,000. So over the course of the 10 years, additional life, we'll see an estimated revenue of approximately $12,400,000.
Is there a net number on that? I mean, that's the gross.
Mm-hmm. That's the revenue, yeah.
Right. But that's many years into the future, if you're thinking that our landfill now will last maybe 25 years and you're adding in. So we don't have a plan that shows you the total net cost because it is such a long-term project. And so the 10-year plan that you see here only shows the cost. Okay.
Rachel, I kind of asked the same question the other day, because the way that was worded is that there's $12 million worth of potential revenue given that space. That's what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. But what it doesn't say is the assumption that our collection and our upkeep is at a profit on that $12 million, or at least not at a loss. because that's the gross revenue potential for that increased capacity to the landfill based on square footage, tipping fees, and the amount that goes in when it gets filled. But what's not stated in that argument is how that translates to a net bottom line number. Is that
Yeah, no, do you mind
wording
if
the
I
question properly?
jump in? Because historically what we've done, I think that the challenge staff was trying to address. Historically, our fees, tipping fees on the landfill side have been adequate to cover our costs, our closure costs, and to provide some subsidy for other programs such as recycling that are not necessarily cash flowing themselves. Looking 25 years, into the future, if we assume that our fee philosophy is the same, our fees would be, the airspace has a value to it that we charge a fee against, which is set according to whatever costs, post-closure costs, and then other programs we want to subsidize. Typically, the tipping fees have always been an opportunity for us to collect a little bit more than the actual expenses. So the airspace has a positive net value to it, but we did not do a 25-year projection on the tipping fees and such. The $12 million number is an example of what the airspace is worth at today's tipping fees. But in general, it has been our history, and we had anticipated it'd be the future, that the tipping fees would be set in such a way that that airspace would have greater value than the cost.
Yeah. I mean, the way I was looking at it, and it's rough math, certainly, not trying to understand costs and expenses in 25 years, but if we're investing between 2014 and 2015, the expense of about $1,014,000. So that extra 10 years of life, real rough, not the time value of money and everything else in there, if we're able to see $101,000, that would pay the cost of the expansion, and that also doesn't take in the intangibles of having a facility that still serves our residents here that extra 10 years. So, I just kind of want to make sure we're not spending $1 million and the only net value is $100,000. It sounds like it's a rough break even, but it's just more kind of tracking how that could play out.
Rob?
Yes, Michael.
Do we get revenue from the shooting range?
No.
The shooting range is used by our sheriff's department and training for other law enforcement.
Yes.
Why don't we get revenue?
Well, the solid waste center does not, and I don't believe the sheriff's department does either. It's a joint facility. It's used as a joint facility, even though it's on county land. I think that's a question that we could broach if the county wanted to start charging for other entities to use the shooting range, then we could talk about that. But up to this time, that hasn't been discussed.
So, but John just talked about airspace value at the range, right?
Well, that's a legitimate policy discussion from the board. Historically, we have not charged any fees for law enforcement agencies using that facility for training. It may be appropriate as we're incurring costs to relocate, because that is an unknown. It would not be a landfill cost to relocate that shooting range and that facility. That would presumably fall either onto the general fund or onto the entities that are benefiting from the use of the shooting range. And Michael, it'd probably be an appropriate time for us to talk to our partners about.
So up until now, it's been viewed as a community benefit.
Benefit.
And so that's the. But if
right.
we're talking about airspace values and expansion in the landfill, and ignoring the shooting range, it seems odd to me.
Well, certainly, that wouldn't be, again, a landfill discussion so much as a general discussion, policy discussion of the boards. But that's, if the board would like us to work up some estimates or a discussion along those lines, we certainly can do that.
I think it's worth a discussion. I think when we evaluate it, I'd kind of hate to see, okay, we're going to charge the sheriff's office $6,000 a year, and we have a new request for $6,000 increase in the sheriff budget. And, you know, certainly when we talk about our relationship with the Aspen Police and their training there, we provide mutual aid to each other, and, you know, it is a community benefit. So, and certainly, given the noise issues we've heard in the past, hopefully this will be less noisy location, but it's not that I would want to see commercial profits, or, you know, it was only a couple years ago we did a really short term allowing of CMC to complete their training classes there because they lost the shooting range somewhere else. But I wouldn't want to try to make it a profit center. But we could discuss it. I mean, it just starts to be, if we tell the city we're charging this for training your police officers, even when we do mutual aid, what are they going to come back and say, oh, we want to start charging you for parking those county vehicles in the basement of the parking garage? You know, I mean,
And it seems to me that, I don't know if Michael was getting at is there an opportunity cost to that space because it's airspace and it could be filled, or is there a cost to maintaining it? And again, I think that's, you know, potentially a slightly different policy discussion down the road. I would entertain it, but
yeah.
I think it would lead. My initial thought is that it would lead to what you're saying, Rachel, is that it's kind of a mutual aid agreement that we support and they support us and in other ways. But
even if that were the case, it should be documented. I mean, it should be, we recognize that your use is to the benefit of the community, but we're incurring whatever.
Get a little credit for it. Yeah.
Just some formality there, it seems to me. Mm-hmm. Because the problem with the shooting range as it stands now, there is never any formality in the development and the development of that shooting range, and it has impacted the community close by to their detriment, no matter what it benefits the sheriff's department. So I just want to see some accounting for this in some way, because we're taking a hard-nosed look at the costs at our landfill. And this is will be in the middle of our landfill.
Steve?
I have a feeling that the shooting range is not, it's not now taking up space that was ever foreseen to be
Permitted.
Fill space, and it looks like on the new location that it's not taking up space that was, you know, designed to be landfill. However, maybe there's a different place in the county that would be a better shooting range where it wouldn't have the noise impact on a part of the community. And in that respect, I think it would be worth looking, you know, taking a look at other possible locations. But I don't have any problem with keeping it at the landfill because it's a.
Let me just weigh in. It sounds to me like the board is interested in a policy discussion regarding this shooting range. So let's put that on another date and get back to the budgetary issues regarding the landfill. And I'll kind of wrap the first section there by just explaining what I just heard, which and what I'm looking at on this chart is that over a 10-year period of time, it's about $1.6 million in hard cost to make a new area of the landfill usable for a revenue center that would potentially collect somewhere around $12 million worth of revenue moving either within that 10 years or beyond that 10 years or within the next 35 years, I suppose, depending on which areas get used first. But that's the way I read the first orange section of this chart.
That's correct. However, some of the expenditures that are shown on this chart under the closure costs, and I believe also Title V, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, the closure costs are amounts that we set aside every year into a balance that we are holding for when the landfill does eventually, many years down the road, close. And so the $61,000, then increasing each year is not an amount that we are actually paying out, but that we are adding in addition to the reserve that we are already setting aside.
So I'll ask the question, how is that number determined? Is it a percentage of
The
something? Is it
percentage of it.
the percentage of the,
Right.
of the potential use of that space, or?
It's just for post-closure care. After the landfill
Okay.
closes, we have to maintain it for 30 years after the landfill closes. So the state of Colorado requires us to have a certain percentage in place. We report to them every year what our balance of that fund is.
And does that get put into a designated restricted fund of some sort? Thank you. The next section,
And the next
I have one
section-
last question on that. The Title V category that we would be moving up to as a landfill, you've mentioned in the memo some additional costs and standards that are related to that. And when we're going down a process like this, I think there's always unknowns, because once we're in that category, we won't be able to move back to a Category 4. And it could be that in 2020, the EPA comes out with new standards, additional testing, additional higher standards for a Title V. So I do think there is a little bit of an unknown there that we can't quite account for. But I did want to kind of ask the question and make sure staff has really fully researched any potential liabilities or additional operating costs or standards that are required by that Title V that we do know of now.
And our engineering firm had done that. In the original memo, I think it was around 1 million. If we really went full-on Title V, had to put in a gas collection system, it was like 1.3 million would be our, and that's worst-case scenario.
And when would we know if we have to put in like a gas collection system then?
Well, when we get kicked into Title V, and I'll probably turn this over to John before I muck it up, we do Tier 1 testing, which is modeling-based potential gas emissions from the landfill. We fail Tier 1, then we go into Tier 2 testing, which is an actual field test method. We fail Tier 2, and then that's when it sort of kicks in. We start looking at a gas collection system. My suspicions is we're so dry and small. I've seen landfills continue to pass Tier 2 year and year after year.
And I think we did some sort of methane study 5 years ago to see if it would be valuable for the, for the gas for electricity generation, and it
Right,
wasn't
we're
significant
far
enough.
below anything right now that would produce an electric energy system.
And the more the food composting doesn't go in the landfill,
Exactly.
the less methane we're
Less
producing as
organics,
well.
right.
Okay. Thank you.
so the next section is solid waste
And I
composting.
would like to refer to the sheet that was handed out to you.
The one that you've got on the board here that says total cost.
Yes. Okay. So this blue section shows the actual costs and revenues of the entire composting program. With the capital in 2014, we have additional fuel and fleet maintenance. Jonah Frank, our fleet manager, went through and analyzed what additional costs might be year to year. There would be one employee who would be dedicated to this operation. That's not a new employee. We are just simply reallocating an existing budgeted position. And then we have expected revenue coming in. You'll see that when you look at the cumulative total, the last line in the blue section, that this project does pay for itself by the end of 2016 and continues to increase, bringing in revenues to the landfill all the way up through the 10 years. In 2021, we would expect that we would need to replace some of the equipment, and so there is a cost of about $1.3 million in that year. However, the cumulative effect of all of the revenues that we would be bringing in more than makes up for the cost of replacing the equipment as you're going along. And so the net gain over the 10-year period is almost $2.8 million.
George?
So, Connie, you said that you're moving from Jonah's staff No, okay.
Jonah is the one who gave us the $40,000 figure for what it would cost in additional fuel and maintenance.
No, for the dedicated FTE person.
Yes.
So that comes from his
From
current
landfill
staff
Correct.
and moving over there. So who's going to take up the slack that
Yeah.
Jonah's losing from that person?
So it's not Jonah. So right now, later on today, the board will be considering a budget supplemental on the single stream recycling program. So right now, a lot of that function in terms of preparing those recyclables to ship to Eagle County is being done with existing landfill staff. Our proposal is to take those existing staff and shift them over to run these programs. And so if frankly, if the board were to choose not to do these programs, then we'd have to evaluate what the future need for those staff are. But when we're going to single stream and privatizing on that side, what it did was it freed up resources at the landfill. While we're looking at taking these on, we already have staff that are trained and ready to go at the landfill. We'd rather take them and shift them over into these programs if this is the direction the board wants to go.
Steve, do you have a question?
Yes. Connie, on the composting revenue, does that include the income from charging for the dumping of food waste from outside the county, as well as for the sale of the finished compost product?
I was going to ask for a breakdown of that number and how that number gets developed, so I think it's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, it is, we do charge on the front end the organic material that is coming in. So yes, I believe that $700,000 number includes that.
So
And
any
then on the
organic
back
material,
end, that is-
including the food waste or whatever,
all the
is
other
included
organic,
in
yeah,
that
that is
income
included.
part?
And then the sale of the compost, it's all wrapped in the same number.
So it's really just those two revenue centers. One is the fees for collection, and two is the sale on the back end. And that amounts to roughly $700,000 a year at this time, with some potential growth through the 10-year period. Other questions, George?
This may be a question for later on, but when you talk about the food waste program, where we're taking in food waste from throughout the western slope, which is the only land solid waste management site that's doing it, isn't that impacting at some point the life of the landfill as well by taking in that additional food waste is one question, and the other is that also exacerbating another problem that we've seen recently in terms of attracting more bears? So is there sort of a cost-benefit analysis in terms of, is it worthwhile for us to pursue that or not take food waste from other areas and just deal with our own food waste and compost and keep it at a minimum?
Well, the food waste makes an excellent compost. It's a good organic wet material. It's a good revenue stream. Last year in 2013, we brought in $35,000 in revenue just collecting food waste. That was food waste alone. And one of the big haulers of that is looking to triple that number this year. He has a lot of demand for it. So yeah, I see it on the revenue side, it's excellent. We are asking here for a wood food waste grinder, which will break down that material, which will help deter the bears. If we keep, I think 30% or 40% of our waste stream is food waste that comes into the garbage. So we can grow, better manage that food waste, grind it up, helps keep the bears out, allows us to compost it more efficiently, which reduces the odor, lets us quickly compost it, can move it through the system faster. I don't see a problem taking in outside food waste.
It would not close the landfill any sooner, George. The only byproduct is some of the composting doesn't take place completely, but we'll use that as daily cover. So it doesn't take up any additional landfill space by bringing in western slope food waste.
But we're also seeing an additional expenditure by having to enlarge that food waste area in terms of dealing with the bears by fencing or some sort of security, which I recall was fairly expensive. Not only the capital cost, but the maintenance cost. So I guess I'm questioning. I like the idea that we want to be more efficient in terms of our current food waste and how we utilize that and compost it, but I'm questioning whether we need to expand that to outside the county and make it into a larger project than it needs to be.
Rachel, you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's kind of a question statement for us to all consider. And, you know, I think this has been a good presentation, but it always leads to more questions for all of us. Because for me, it seems that there should be some sort of contingency in these numbers. You know, if we were doing a construction project or anything else, we would have some sort of contingency for unaccounted for things. And so for me, you know, you may get to a point where you want to say, are we going to need the fencing or these sort of supplies if it becomes an attractive nuisance for the bears. And we were fortunate last year. It was a good food year. They weren't coming down the same way. But the year before, we certainly were dealing with some big issues there. And so that was the one thing I was thinking. And the composting, I know we just recently at Hunter Creek got a little flyer in our bills to ask would we like to participate in the city's composting program, and if so, would we keep food waste in our houses, or would we do it in our dumpster area, or things like that. So we probably have a pretty significant amount of food waste currently going into our landfill that does take up food that's not been separated from the regular garbage. So the success of the composting program, I think, is valuable for us. I also don't know the dynamics of it as to when you can't compost because you haven't collected enough food waste to mix with the other harder materials like wood that has been grinded and things like that. Because it's not just food waste when you make the compost. What else are you mixing in that gets rid of things that would fill the landfill?
Along with the wood, we have leaves and grass, which we get a significant quantity of, as well as the biosolids from the wastewater treatment plants.
So you need a mix of all three ingredients to make the right compost.
It's a balance of the carbon to the more green waste material.
It occurred to me reading through some of this material that there's some budgetary constraints, which are budgetary issues that a lot of this packet addresses. There are also some policy direction questions that came to mind. Two of which were, one, how does the landfill manipulate supply and demand for creating the market mix? I mean, you could lower a price of something that you want to collect more of to get more of it, even if it's at a loss because you want to get that out of the landfill. So there's that issue, and it wasn't really all that addressed on how we look at things. Much like we're talking about single stream, increasing recyclables by 30%, you know, whether it be an environmental issue that we're taking those things out of the landfill, or environmental issue that they're being reused and you don't have to remine glass and aluminum and those sorts of things. So we have a policy decision that we can help manipulate the landfill to create a better community in a lot of different senses. Another one that was just brought up, which is, you know, how much should our landfill be servicing other counties? This is it's Picken County's landfill, and we've got it open to a lot of outsider communities that are bringing their products to us. And that can be manipulated by having either discounted rates for Picken County or non-discount or extra fees if you're bringing it in for someone else. Because I do think there's a merit to say, this is close to our community and we don't want to ship our garbage somewhere else. But we've only got 35 years on this. And 35 years from now, there's a good chance we will be shipping our garbage somewhere else. Unless we can maintain that longer. And one of the ways to maintain that longer is to have less outsiders use it and more insiders use it. So those are some, you know, I'm not sure when we should address those questions, but those are some policy questions that I think the board should address in terms of directing the landfill to do what they want. think the same question relates to additional revenue or savings that we've got. Well, is this a revenue center that we're just going to bank that money to use in the future, or do we use some of that money to create a better community by being able to collect more outreach, more, let's get people to dispose of their paints properly. The example I used with John the other day was, if it's an expensive thing for someone to get rid of their paint, they're either going to dump it in their backyard or dump it in the dumpster, and then it's going to end up in the river, as opposed to subsidizing those programs to make sure that people are disposing of things properly. But those are kind of the policy decisions revolving around what we do after we make the directional decisions that are presented today.
We've always addressed them as the imbalance is identified. So regardless of what the product is coming in, food waste, for instance, if it became a tremendous imbalance by bringing in western slope food waste, we could bring that to the board and discuss a policy to rectify that situation. Each year we bring tipping fee changes to the board. Those adjustments are made because we see imbalances in either cash flow or how much product is coming into the fill. So that's a good point.
So in synopsis of the second section, the way I'm reading this costs and revenue is that we've got a big outlay of cost for equipment up front, close to $800,000, but there's a revenue that offsets that moving forward, and after a 10-year period, it's basically a net gain to the budget of $2.8 million. With the current tipping fees again, that are the current collection and selling fees, which again could be altered to alter this in those policy directions that we were talking about.
And as I said, I'd really like to see a contingency built into these numbers. It's better to be safe than sorry, get good news at the end of a budget year than other way around, and as well as what could be the potential of needing fencing, and because we just don't have that number in here. And we might have needed it no matter what we were doing. It's been time to deal with the bears better.
Rob?
Yes, Steve.
We are I have a gut feeling that we will solve the bear problem by having this equipment and being able to process the food waste and get it mixed in with other stuff quickly. And that could lead to a future cost savings of not having to build a fence around the composting area.
And the whole
And that's
thing, yeah.
that's an unknown. We have to try this to then see what the effect on the
And that was
bear
the plan
issue
this
is.
summer, look at how the branding worked. And then, hey, did it, we fence it next year, or hey, we didn't see many bears in there, so.
But that's part of that contingency thing that
Yeah.
Rachel's referring to, that's an unknown that we don't know whether we'll need to build that fence or not, is just one possible future cost.
Rob?
Yeah, Rachel?
Not to keep beating the same issue. I mean, we had bear issues before we had composting, and so we need to keep that in mind. I mean, there may be fencing that's needed that's separate from the composting area. It may be, like I said, maybe it's time to move up to new responsibilities, because a lot of people don't compost, they throw it in their regular garbage. That's going to attract bears to the rest of the landfills separate from the composting area. I don't, when we get into the wastewater treatment plant, odor has always been one of my concerns. That might attract bears more. I don't know. Might repel bears. I don't know.
Thank you.
Other questions on the composting section of this? Move on to the wastewater treatment plant.
The wastewater treatment plant is already included in the 2014 budget of the landfill. It was brought to you as a buy request during the budget process. But this just shows again the net cost of the program. Included in this chart is a half-time position. Again, as John was explaining, that some of the recycling positions will be repurposed, and Kathy estimates that half of a person's time, 20 hours a week, would be needed for this wastewater treatment plant. And so here you just really see the whole cost and revenues associated with it, where in the initial years it is an additional cost to the landfill, but then as we move out, you see that the revenues start to pay back the initial investment costs, where by 2018 it has paid for itself. By the end of the 10-year period, about $1.1 million in extra revenue above and beyond the investment costs.
Rachel?
Yeah, similar to a comment that was made before, I struggle with this because I don't know the revenue breakdowns. And so while I can take on face value $225,000 worth of revenue, I kind of wanted to know how many trips annually is that based on, how much are we going to charge, you know, is this 225 trips a year at $1,000, or, you know, it just didn't tell me what is the going rate people are having to pay in West Canyon or wherever they're dumping now, and how we're going to be competitive so that we do receive the revenues. And so that I was looking a little more for a revenue breakdown. I also would really like to see a contingency fee in this as well, because then you have that safety factor. If revenues are down one year, or someone's undercutting us for the business, or whatever it is. And it just seemed also that perhaps the maintenance was low. You know, if you really have a aerator break and you have to, you know, is that because it's warranted through that 10-year? Or, you know, or is it possible to have a $25,000 piece of that equipment, or is this just assuming maintenance and no breakdown? So those were the questions I kind of had on the revenue breakdown, to see the assumptions that built those numbers.
George?
The other part of that, and again, this may be for a different discussion or later on in your presentation, is on the wastewater treatment plant. When we had that presentation a while ago, one of the questions or concerns was where are we going to be moving that additional water? And is there going to be a cost associated with that? So I don't know whether that's been addressed in this presentation or not.
There was a use for the gray water that comes out of it
Yeah.
in the landfill, that we don't have water there
We
now?
don't have water, dust control, our own uses for toilet water, pressure washer cleaning, composting operations. Some of the dirt haulers that do a lot of excavation around here have indicated they could use that in the summertime. The rest is a struggle we're dealing with. We're looking at grants. We're looking at engineered wetlands to send it through. There's a lot of grant opportunities for that. So yeah, we're looking at some of the uses. We have to have 40,000 gallons of water on site for storage for the fire department. So we're struggling. That is a little bit of a problem. It's not unsolvable, but.
Steve?
You have cost for some of the water system, like for holding tanks for fire protection. Do you also have the benefits of providing water for the landfill built into the projected revenues? It's maybe a cost saving. You're getting water
Right.
through a means, which if you didn't get it from here, you'd have to spend money to get water from some other means. So
It's a good point. We didn't calculate that in, but yeah, we do have to buy water sometimes for dust control, for our own like toilet uses and hand washing.
so there is some
There's some
cost
savings
savings
there,
there,
yeah.
probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rachel?
When we did look at this facility in the budget hearings, and I am in general supportive. I think it's been a direction we've been trying to move in, and is good. But we did, I think, ask some questions that would be further answered as we go to implement. And one of those was really about odor control. And I had asked the question, should it, you know, does the facility need to be housed? Will that help control odor or not? And so I just still don't feel like I have that, what this thing is going to look like. And that's why I don't feel like I have how many loads a day can it process, and therefore match the revenue assumptions of loads per day. You know, it's just haven't seen it at that level. We've seen it conceptually, and we know there's a need, and again, supportive of that need. But I just haven't seen the A plus B minus C equals D. Are we buying this facility that will support 225,000? If we have that size facility, what are the odor issues and how do we contain those?
We're in the process right now, GR Fielding, the county engineers, helping me put together the RFP, and those are some of the specs that will go in. Some of the preliminary systems we looked at are self-contained. There's no open ponding, and they can be sized at what we estimate. We're estimating right now 2 million gallons of septage a year, and that's based on discussions with the septic tank haulers. So that $225,000 revenue is based on 15 cents a gallon.
Okay.
And that could certainly be higher. I know South Canyon just raised their rates, so we would certainly match that. But again, we don't want to there's pride in cost savings to county residents for this service.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it has to be a profit center or whatever. I mean, those are the community values we all weigh. I just know that later in our agenda, under memos of interest, we have, tentative budget approvals for these things, and that's why I just wasn't sure I personally had all the pieces of the puzzle to know that they have fit together the way I'd like. I don't want to commit those sort of dollars and then later have oh boy, we need to do something different with the odor, or
And certainly we'll be back once the RFP process is done to see who comes forward with what kind of system.
We need to probably get those details through the RFP process.
Okay. And once you've gone through an RFP, you are committed to award, or could you decide that none of them hits our specs and none of them will be awarded?
You can decide. You should go out to an RFP process with the absolute intent, because the contractors are putting a lot of effort and time and expense. But if we don't get a proposal that meets our needs or values or somehow
Budgets.
failed to meet our expectations, we're under no obligation to contract
Okay.
those out.
That helps a lot.
One of the things I'll just throw out there as a comment that, having this landfill close to our economic community, it's a huge benefit to our economic community.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I look at these things as, I get my grease trap, pulled and those sorts of things, and they're hauling that stuff way far away, and that's an added cost to the person that I'm paying to do it. Hopefully that cost will go down a little bit when they get a better deal or use less gas doing various things or composting or whatnot. But it really supports our economic community having this be as vibrant as it can be. Another comment that I wanted to make, because Connie keeps on saying various things are approved in our budget, and as we go through our budget, I'm the guy that says, this is the allocation of money to potentially use as we see the plans. Now we're seeing the
appropriated.
Exactly, appropriated. So now we're seeing the plans, and we put a policy to actually use the funds potentially, but just because it's been put in our budget doesn't necessarily mean that we've got all the details to spend it. And I don't want anybody to think that these things were decided and approved 100% when we did the budget. Now's the time to get into the details of it and to move it forward or not move it forward. Because I've always thought that was weird.
We
going
use the
through
term
budget.
pending buy-ups or potential
Yeah.
buy-ups.
So the idea that, just because it's gone through budget process doesn't mean that it's a done deal and the money's already being spent for all cases. Steve?
Do we want to talk about the siting of different things in the landfill area now in relation to the odor of the wastewater treatment facility? It's on the site closest to the Aspen Village.
And as we go through the
We do have more of our present,
So we might want to talk about that later. but
Yeah.
It is related to the odor
Yeah.
issue, and
I think this is kind of the
Looking at the
30,000-foot view of budget
Okay.
of everything that we're talking about, and we've got, I think, about 15 more pages on our presentation,
We can look at
and
that
we've got
later for sure.
an hour and 15 minutes left in our timing, so.
So I'd like to very quickly go over the 10-year budget plan that was handed out to you. what we wanted to do in this was give you an update. During the budget process, we showed a 5-year plan with everything that was appropriated in the 2014 budget, and then drawing that out over 5 years and what the effect is on the fund balance of the landfill. So what's in front of you now is taking that out 10 years instead of 5, and adding in the effects of the landfill expansion, the composting, wastewater was already included. So it's taking everything and adding it in so that you can see the effect on the fund balance by doing everything that is in this presentation. The first orange line would show the new unrestricted fund balance of the landfill. I say unrestricted to mean that we do also have our post-closure balance that is separate. And so the money not included in that post-closure balance is in the first orange line. And so you see that at the end of 2014, it would be around $500,000. It does dip down into the negative in 2015. There's a small cash flow issue, although I believe there will probably be enough savings in other areas of the landfill, as there normally are year to year, that when we actually get to 2015, we will probably see that in the positive. So there's a small cash flow, and then we're back up into the positive in the fund balance. The fund balance increases year to year until 2021, where again we're having some major replacements of the composting. And there in 2021, it drops down to a little over $1 million, but then again increases back up to where by 2023 we would project about $2.2 million in the fund balance. Now, in order to compare with what we presented during the budget process, the bottom orange line shows the numbers that we gave you during the budget process, what we thought the fund balance would be. So you can see the difference as you're going along between the new plan and the former plan.
Do we have the right page up here? Are you on this page now?
We're on that page that you got in your hand.
Yeah, do we have that page to put up there?
We can put it on the
We can put it on the Elmo. I was getting a little confused going back and forth. It's okay.
There it is.
Okay, that's better.
So did the previous 5-year fund balance not include the landfill expansion, the composting, wastewater treatment costs and revenues?
The previous balance included part of that.
Part of it, but not the whole package?
Not the whole, right.
Okay.
And so that first orange line shows you the whole, everything put together, what's the effect on the fund balance. And over the 10-year plan, it's really not a huge difference. It's about a little less than $400,000 actually extra revenue into the landfill by implementing this full plan. But then there, as discussed earlier, there are other pieces of that that can't be calculated in only 10 years. There are other benefits that are far more long range.
Rob, do you mind if I?
Yeah, please, Chuck.
So, the basic story is, and I think from a financial perspective, the policy question is, what we're proposing is an initial pretty significant investment in infrastructure, particularly to do the wastewater treatment, the landfill expansion, and then the largest investment is actually into the equipment for the composting, the grinders and such, and we will talk a little bit about what we think that means from a quality and impact perspective, because I think there are improvements to be made. In the long-term plan, there's a slight improvement. The landfill is sustainable going forward, so the real question is, do we want to expand into these service areas or not? Are these services that we should be offering for our community? We think in the big picture, you have some that are money makers. I think even with contingencies put in, they'll float, you're going to have other programs that still are a cost, a net cost. And so this picture was just put together, show you if we do all these things, how do the net revenue generators and net cost drivers mix, and do we have the right mix of services going forward at our landfill? We think our proposal is fiscally sustainable in the long run.
I have a question, and I'm just having a little trouble seeing the comparison between the previous 10-year budget plan total costs that you were showing us and this 10-year plan, because as I was kind of summarizing each section, we've got the landfill expansion, which over 10 years is going to cost us $1.6 million. We've got the composting, which is going to save us $2.8 million. We've got the wastewater treatment plant that's going to save us $1.1 million, $1.15 million. If you put those three together, we're basically talking a $2.8 million, or is that correct? That would be $2.4 million increase. But then I look to the budget page, and it looks like the change is $389.
That's because some parts of this are already included. Some parts were already included.
Some parts were already
in the
included
budget.
in this.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's where just comparing budget to budget doesn't give you the whole picture. On this sheet, what we really wanted to show you is not just the budget change,
Yeah.
but what's the whole
Those
program cost.
individual programs,
Right.
yeah.
And so when you actually get into a 5 or a 10-year plan, some pieces were already included, some revenues were
Some
already
of that
included.
additional
Then there's
$2.4 million was already in this.
That's right.
So theoretically, if we didn't go forward with any of these three projects, we would see a decrease of about $2 million on that, the 2.4 minus the $389,000. So,
Yes, because especially with the wastewater treatment, the revenues over the long term were already included.
and I would also argue not including the contingency number that Rachel would like to be put in there, and I think it's good to put a 5-7% contingency number on these programs that, expenditures may be higher and revenues may be lower. And it would be nice to budget that number, and I agree with you 100% on that, Rachel. Other questions, Rachel?
Are we allowed to cash flow from the closure fund? I mean, obviously, we want to make sure, but that's our money anyhow towards the closure, so we could help cash flow from that. Thank you.
It's a restricted, non-restricted fund.
As long as you have coverage in some other place within the county.
Yeah, and that's why just cash flow, a short-term basis until the revenues come in from the improvement.
When we're looking at the master plan in terms of all the usages of the solid waste area, is there an opportunity to look at a solar array there, a solar farm?
There is, and we're looking into it. We'll see if there's any viability, and if there is, we can bring something to the board in the near future. Certainly, it'd have to be off the fill, but there's other property alongside that it could accommodate such a site. We're looking into that.
Next.
So we'll move along. Thanks, Connie. Why we bring Connie? We're going to kind of go into the details of each of these big programs. We already went a little bit into the landfill expansion, give you the details on that. So we presented that to you on November 12, 2013, and in the packet I included that AIS memo, if you want to go back and look at the details. But we're going to recommend the 10-year additional site life expansion. It just makes sense. So again, here's the layout of the site, and this is the area of the expansion we're looking at. Again, 82 scale house, come up around the compost area. Let's see, increase the site life. We're looking at, it's a 2-year process to get that permit in place, at least 18 months to 2 years. So getting started on it, we'll have at least 2 years before we can fill the operation. Once we get that permit in place, we're looking at another 3 to 4 months of construction. As I mentioned, we'll have to put in a liner and a leachate collection system. But that's typically the general timeline. We would like to start filling, within 2 to 2.5 years in that area. And here's some of the numbers again that Connie just went over. Again, $12.4 million in revenue over the course of that 10 years. And then part of the 2014 budget does include the starting of the permitting costs for that first year.
So I had a question
Yeah.
regarding that as I was going through this presentation last night. What is the argument that now is the right time to do this expansion? We're not going to lose the land, it's ours.
Right.
We've got 25 years of our existing landfill, so theoretically we could do this 22 years from now and have the expenditure 22 years into the future. Obviously it'll cost more as inflation goes up. But what are the argument points that now is the right time for this capital expenditure for an asset that really we're going to not use for 25 years? Or an argument would say that we're not going to use it, depending on which section you use first.
Right. Well, as permitting goes, it's not an easy process. It's very complicated. And it's just getting more and more difficult as the years go on. The state will put in new regulations, new restrictions, and it could be we get a few years down the road and they're like, no expansions. As I mentioned before, I believe there is no new landfill going in the country right now. It's just that difficult. So now's the time to kind of get going on it, get your permit in your pocket and hold on to it. It also makes sense to start filling up there. It's out of the way. Currently when we're filled on top, we're going to move it down to where the aggregate area is. We're permitted for that area, but it's just in the way. It's down there closer to the operations. And as construction and everything goes, the costs are just going to increase as the years go on. So.
The other thing this does, and I think from an operational standpoint, the most exciting part, it provides a large footprint to expand composting and energy recovery or whatever program requires space at the landfill. Gives us a bigger site by filling in that gully.
So it's layout.
Yeah, we increase that
Absolutely.
platform on top.
You mentioned that regulations might get harder and different. I think it would be important to say that I think Picken County would want to be the type of community that at least stays in tune with those regulations, and even if we're not required to upgrade, that we look at which ones we should be upgrading as that time goes on to provide a better, less groundwater going into our streams or whatever from the area as those regulations change.
Right.
Roll. Steve?
In all of your different scenarios, you have a decrease in the final elevation of the landfill. And maybe there was a policy decision at one point to bring the final elevation down from what was originally proposed, but one way to expand the landfill instead of going into the gully would be to just go up more. What's the cost comparison of doing those two different ways?
Well, to go up any more, we become more visible to Woody Creek, as well as the Wildcat Ranch. So we're right now very near, I might have John jump in, to where we can go. We're really more of a horizontal out at this point. We're kind of locked in. John, you want to add some of this? John Brees?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, that's a good question. I think it was brought up last time in the November meeting, and I think the comment was, why don't we stay at the permitted elevation and then expand laterally as well, and I think that's a good idea, but as you build, if you, from a to oversimplify, if you look at like a pyramid, the pyramid can only get so tall as the base is at the bottom. And similarly, the same situation applies at a landfill. So the slopes, exterior slopes are dictated from a regulatory basis. And so you can't go over, a certain slope, say a 4-to-1 slope. And if you get steeper than that, then you have other environmental concerns, whether it's from an erosion standpoint or whatever the case is. So it's not, you just can't go as high as you necessarily want to. It's basically based on the land mass that you have available to work with.
Okay.
So any other additional questions on the expansion? Now we get into compost operations. We've had a successful composting operation for well over a decade at the landfill. We produced 3,298 tons of compost in 2013. We sold 2,400 tons of that as compost, straight up compost, and another near 1,700 tons as a topsoil and potting soil mix. It's a hugely popular product. As a matter of fact, in the fall we sold out. We couldn't keep up with the demand. So the compost area is already currently established. It's on the very top of the landfill, and it's in that yellow section as indicated there. There's some plans, we're talking maybe expanding it out a little bit or increasing the size. Certainly if we go with the 10-year expansion, we can build up that platform on the top to allow us to increase that area as well. Really the focus of what we're asking for today is a grinder and equipment to handle basically food waste. It's the largest area of growth in the composting industry, as 30% of waste streamed by weight is food, ends up in the landfill. That Picken County, along with Aspen, did a waste composition study a few years ago, and it was determined that 35 to 40% of waste coming in just in Picken County was food waste. So we see a real need by keeping that out of the landfill. We decrease the greenhouse gas production, as well as save space in the landfill. We composted 1,299 tons of food waste in 2013, and that is an increase of 292 tons over 2012. So it's a hot area. It's a good revenue stream, as well as makes a very good compost material. And there's just some photos kind of showing you the food waste product coming in as it cooks in the pile, and then the finished product. So we're looking to purchase additional and specialized equipment to manage the compost and food waste. What this is going to do is increase the efficiency of the quality of the compost material, as well as reduce the odors. Right now, we have a food waste mixer. It chunks it up. We get it into the windrow piles. It takes it a while. We have to get it to temperatures. We cook it at over 133 degrees has to maintain that temperature for 18 days. We have trouble by not breaking down that food waste or the other chunkier materials. It takes us a while to get it up to temperature. So we believe if we can get a grinder, it increases that surface area of the waste, reduces the chunkiness of it, it'll compost quicker, as well as reduce the bears and then other nuisances such as the birds.
So Kathy, if you were to go back to the pictures, because there's a lot of food material sitting in these pictures, they're in those windrows, and that that's the nuisance. If you have the proper equipment, the grinder, that doesn't look like that anymore. Sorry, Rob. Okay, and I just wanted to be clear that that is probably one of the bigger benefits. So we don't have the right equipment right now to really grind this up. And that's to one of your points, Steve.
And we demoed a piece of equipment back in late summer, I believe, and it really does. It comes out, you can't even tell it's food anymore.
And then that's mixed with the wood chip and chipped operations?
The wood chips, leaves and grass, we mix it all together. It's a mix of wood chips against that organic green material.
Well,
Yes, Michael.
so you have this materials, I see there's plastic bags there, so that's a contaminant of some sort. Do you eliminate those contaminants?
You get those materials, we can take in those compostable bags. Again, a grinder would help with that considerably, as well as the compostable drinkware and serveware. As for the plastic bags and maybe glass or metal that gets in there, we're looking to purchase a trommel screen. Heartland also has one on site right now that kind of gets that material out as best it can. We're actually very lucky. We don't have a lot of contamination in our stream. I went down to a facility, A1 Composting near Denver, and he had plastic everywhere, and that was a real scourge for him. We don't see it. So.
And what about pathogens, and how do you certify this as a compost that doesn't spread disease or doesn't spread?
Part of that is taking it up to temperatures. We get it over 133 degrees, and we have to hold those temperatures for 18 days straight. If they dip down, we got to start it all over again. So composting studies have shown if you get it above that temperature, it will kill out the pathogens, the weed seeds. And we also, when a pile is ready to go, we send it away for testing. So we have analyticals to say it's clean and good to go.
So it's certified to some degree?
Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, we just got certified by the U.S. Composting Council. It's called the Standard for Testing Assurance. So we just received that certification that our material is good for sale.
Steve?
You mentioned the possibility of taking sludge from the wastewater treatment plant and composting that. Would there be any, I mean, I know there would be concerns, but is that the same thing? You just have to get it up to the right temperature for a certain number of days in order to kill any potential pathogens?
We are currently permitted to accept biosolids, and that's the sludge material from all the surrounding wastewater treatment plants we get in. So yeah, it's the same, would be the same material coming out of ours.
Okay.
And again, that temperature takes down, and we test for it to make sure that E. coli and such is gone.
Okay. Rachel?
I just have to know, what is a thumb attachment on the
Yes,
excavator?
that's a
On and off switch with your...
Basically, that's what it is. It's a big claw that comes down and it's able to grab the wood waste.
Okay.
We're looking at a dual-use type of equipment, which you can see there. It will also grind food waste, and then we can grind the brush material that comes in as well. So we can, you know, on site, again, the full-time operator would be in charge of making sure we have enough wood waste material while he's grinding food waste. So.
They do it like this, Rachel.
It's like a video game.
So. And there's just a couple pictures of sort of the equipment we're looking at.
The question hasn't really been asked, so I'm going to throw it out there. Describe how this is a comparison, upgrade, change to our current operations, which is a contract situation with an outside business. It hasn't really been talked about, that the plan is to do this on our own and to no longer continue the contract with the people that are doing it now.
Yeah, currently Heartland is doing that operation for us by bringing it on site. We have budgeted, and I don't believe it came up in here, $500,000 a year for this type of operations. So again, another cost savings by taking it in-house, allow us to purchase equipment, do it more efficiently, and allow a full-time person that's a county employee to handle that operation.
And are we going to do a better job? I mean, there's an argument that, you know, some things are best if you do it yourself, and some things are best. You know, I'm not going to put in a new hot water heater in my house because I don't have the expertise to do it.
Right.
So, you know, where's the argument that we have the expertise better than the current contractor?
We would add expertise, just having our own equipment in-house. Essentially, we rent it from Heartland to do those operations. We are looking at, we're going to get training this year. We're going to get U.S. Composting Council certified on composting management programs. Just the savings on the cost of equipment, we own it and operate it. Last fall, like I said, we ran out of material, and I believe if county was managing that material properly, we'd have a better handle on what we're running out of, screening it, be able to do that in-house, have our own equipment on site.
Right, you know, in my involvement in this isn't a quality question with Heartland per se at all. It's you know, just looking at, if you look at the out years on the composting, I believe our revenues would be the same, because the amount of product we're producing, what we're selling is independent of our contracting relationship. And so we have the same revenues built in. It's the long-term cost. What we do is we make an initial investment in our own equipment, but where we have a cost of nearly $500,000 a year, that cost drops down, as you can see, to just over under $200,000 a year on the ongoing operating. Obviously we're depreciating equipment and such, and we're purchasing it. We have that built back in, you can see in 2021. So we have those costs, but we think that over the same time period that this cash flows better because we're bringing down our operating costs. Quality-wise, what the public can expect, Heartland does a good job for us. It's not an issue of that. We believe we'll be able to do a good job by following the right kinds of standards. So it's just a simple cost-benefit analysis, and we believe the costs are lower bringing it in-house.
And then we just sort of gave, it was presented in the 2014 budget process. So there was just, we presented it and we were to come back and revisit this issue, which we are doing today. Now moving on to the wastewater treatment system. We had some discussions back, I believe, in the fall. And as I mentioned, we're looking to install a 5,000 gallon per day, probably greater, modular wastewater treatment system. We're currently in the process of preparing an RFP. Like I said, GR Fielding, the county engineer, is adding his engineering expertise. And we're hoping to have that out hopefully in the next month. And then once we get those bids back, we will revisit with you the options we have. There's probably a 6-month permitting process the state has indicated to us to get that system permitted in place, but they were all in favor of it. They see it as a beneficial use for county residents. We currently have 2 options we are looking at. This bright pink area. This current area is where the current shooting range is. That's one option, as well as over in the boneyard, that vacant area space we have where we store metals and tires. In the original addendum to the solid waste master plan, they had the septic treatment system up on top here. What we need to do is, we said we have an excess of water we need to think about. So you really don't want the treatment system up there with effluent we have to deal with to get it off the landfill. We try as hard as we can to keep water off the landfill. So we are looking at options. Like I said, we have on-site uses. We need storage. Some things that have been brought up engineering-wise are constructed wetlands. So by putting the systems either in one of these 2 locations, it's easy to get it down the hill and treat it. But that's an option. It's keeping it off the waste mass. And there's already some wetlands in place. There's a constructed wetland down here. And then we also have a small wetland down at the base of the hill off the waste mass. So part of the RFP process and the permitting process, we'll look at what's the most ideal location. My gut feeling right now will probably be over in the boneyard, just because space, view from Woody Creek is a potential. We have to get truck traffic in, the septic trucks to dispose of the waste. And Rachel, we are looking at an enclosed system, which really there no smell we're hoping for, because Aspen Village would certainly let us know.
If I may, I think Steve had started to allude to this. I'm going back to the layout picture. Just the inclination is the idea of the old shooting range as being further away proximity from the denser population base. I don't know enough about prevailing winds in that area, if we have any sort of real pattern, or if every day is different. But that was just my instinct, is to say further away, because we're looking at just a landfill map. If we looked at a greater GIS map and could see the proximity to the various population bases, I'm less sure that visual impact of being able to see some trucks from one area outweighs somebody else potentially being closer and having odor issues. And I think once we make that investment, it's not something we want to hear about later, we have problems, because we're not going to move the facility then. And so I think that in the RFPs, that should be just very, very clearly addressed. So are you kind of saying you're going to let the engineers pick both spots, or we're going to have to give them both spots to vet in their application, or how we're going to proceed?
Right. You know, Rachel, I think right now what we're anticipating is a completely enclosed modular system, which if that is in fact what we are able to purchase, to treat, smell doesn't become an issue with a fully enclosed system. It's not like having an open system like you might have a sewer system or what have you, where there are odor issues. And so if that's the case, we may want to err more on the side of visual impact, which is where the boneyard location, I think, may be more beneficial. If there is a component where the whole process is not contained, and there may be, you know, some
when they're
radius
unloading the trucks,
of
used to
odor.
always be the problem down here on the Rio Grande.
Then it's possible that having the farther location where there may be some visual impact, it could probably be mitigated, quite frankly, with some berming or landscaping kind of elements, which aren't included in our plan. But we have these two locations that are possibilities. They're better for different reasons, and I think we need to understand a little bit better how the systems might work. I don't know if our engineering firm might have some comment on how these systems work today. That might be helpful for us.
Yeah, I guess specifically from an enclosed system. I don't know if you want to talk on that.
Bring your chair up.
Yeah.
You look so uncomfortable.
You know, I think there's probably a lot of different systems out there. In fact, I know there are the ones that we've researched. It is an enclosed system, being mindful of potential odor issues that, you know, are an impact and trying to serve those needs.
By enclosed systems, do you mean that when the trucks come in to unload, it's actually within a house or an enclosed area, or after they've unloaded, it's processed through an enclosed area? That's kind of, again, when
Sure, yeah.
both the North 40 area and when out at the Sand District, and then when they used to unload in town, it was the unloading of the trucks that caused the big problem, and not once it was in the system.
Sure, and I haven't reviewed my notes in a while, but, you know, the process for this facility would be enclosed. From an unloading standpoint, you know, let's say you'd have, like a better terminology, maybe like a surge tank that would hold some of this capacity, and then as it's processed through the system, the enclosed system. So basically having everything enclosed from an unloading to a processing standpoint. So.
Yeah, we visited a facility and they had a cam lock. So they come up, the septic trucks come up, they have a hose, they cam lock the hose and discharge it right into the system. So.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if we can find a few spots that we could go visit, either not necessarily a group because it might be a long travel, but we all do travel a lot to Denver for CCI and different things like that, and we could, you know, take a look at some of these, or maybe some of the purveyors, when you come back after the RFPs, will actually have some videos of their systems and things like that.
The one facility you visited was in
Wyoming,
Wyoming.
yeah, up at the oil and gas camp, so.
Steve?
I was wondering if it would be possible to put a little wind anemometer at the couple different locations in the landfill and just start recording data as to wind speed and direction. And that, maybe you could also do that up at the like up at the compost area, just so we'd have some baseline data for
General wind direction.
what does the wind do and where is it windy or less windy, because that could affect the decisions on where to locate things.
Absolutely.
George?
Would the size be the same, the facility at either location? Because it looks like The Boneyard, it's, you've got a larger footprint.
It would essentially be the same size.
This is just the size of the current shooting range and the
Yeah.
current boneyard.
Probably have to do some roof work up there as well. Okay, we're looking at a timeline. Like I said, we're hoping to get an RFP out next month. Once that process is, 6 months to get it permitted. Depending on the timing of the permit, you know, we don't want to do construction in the middle of the winter, so it would be probably spring. So that just gives you a timeline. Some of the companies we've initially talked to get an idea how these systems work. They're generally packaged systems that don't take much time to construct at all, and they deliver them to the site. And get some engineering earthwork to get those in.
Kathy, you have power to these. How do you get power to them?
Well, that was an instrument we asked because they do have pumps. They're not high voltage pumps. They're fairly small, which surprised me, the systems we looked at. We could run electricity over, if we put it in the boneyard, we'd have to run an electric line at a cost of about $20,000. Or this company we talked to, you can put it in solar. With a battery backup to run the pumps, but they're not large pumps and it isn't a huge power demand.
That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's not months. I was just noticing your timeline is days of the week, not months.
Well, not months.
Microsoft. This is fast track, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
We're gonna get this
Friday.
done quick. Yeah, sorry about that. It should be in months.
Yeah.
But I'll give you the general timeline. It can go in pretty quick. It's the permitting that's going to take the longest.
Okay.
And the state has indicated that they're willing to work with us. I think it's a great project that's desperately needed.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been mentioned yet in this meeting, but one of the real keys has always been to be able to encourage folks at an affordable cost to maintain their septic tanks efficiently, and that can add to stream and water, groundwater benefits across the valley.
George?
So are there grants available for a project such as this?
Mm-hmm. The county's hired a grants firm that has identified a number of grants that we can pursue. There's plenty of money. Apparently the Solid Waste Center is prime for grant opportunity, especially if you attach an educational component to it, which we certainly do.
The most promising opportunities really had to do with if we did any constructed wetlands or such, that those would be opportunities to really have those expenses covered through grants. And the amount of water, even though it sounds like a lot of gallons, when you look at it as a consistent flow, we're talking about maybe a garden hose at, you know, a half to 3/4 kind of run, and so it's not a ton of water coming all at one time. So a wetland is just going to be probably more of a watered, vegetated area. You're not talking about having ponds or that sort of thing in all likelihood. So, but there are grant opportunities, but they're mostly on that, what do we do if we have excess water?
It's not only about constructing the wetlands, but also using it as an educational learning tool for training either CMC students or Aspen school students to learn about wetlands and how they function. So there's a few different grant opportunities available there.
Steve?
I can see a possible side benefit of having the wastewater treatment thing at our landfill. It's kind of similar to Rob's thing about the commercial costs, but cost to homeowners, if there's substantial savings to a homeowner, I would think they would be more likely to have their septic tanks emptied more frequently and therefore maybe prevent some odor problems, septic tank failure problems in all parts of the county where people use septic systems.
Mm-hmm. And we're working closely with our environmental health department. I mean, they have identified there's just in the county alone 3,000 septic tanks.
I think, again, a policy question is how do how to create a program where that benefit is utilized. Because what could happen, although free market will take care of some of it by lowering prices if they're being charged less, but what could happen is part of that profit gets put into the provider who's pumping the septic tank, as opposed to so they're not really seeing any savings or aware of any savings, but a rebate, I mean, much like Core does rebates for energy efficient stuff. It could be once, the landfill is going to pay back something to you if you show us your bill. That sort of thing. If that money could somehow get back into providing a greater benefit to our community, healthier septic tanks would be the greater benefit to the community. So, but I think there needs to be thought process from a policy decision as we look at our fees, whether it be tipping fees, the cost of compost. What do we want these programs to give back to our community?
Anything else on the subject? And then just briefly, again, I have the shooting range in here. It's been in the master plan. We've considered moving the shooting range to a place further from the surrounding residents because of noise. And then the responsibility of that falls to, I believe, the surrounding sheriff offices, police departments. We've designated an area up there along the road to move the shooting range to. Got some space, yeah.
George?
So, Catherine, you said the responsibility to move the range is the responsibility of the public safety officers. Does that mean budgetarily or just picking up and moving some targets?
George, it hasn't really been defined. I think it's reasonable that we wouldn't expect that it would be a function of the landfill necessarily or that enterprise fund. But it hasn't really been defined who it is a responsibility of in any documents that we've looked at this point. The benefit accrues to the public safety agencies. And so this is going back, I think, to the discussion that Michael had brought up, which is if we're going to incur costs for the benefits of all our public safety agencies, how do we share in that responsibility if we're sharing in the benefit? And to be honest with you, that's a discussion we still need to have. It's one that we brought up with each other when we were talking about this item in the master plan. But I think it's reasonable for us not to expect the enterprise fund or the fee payers for the landfill to necessarily be paying for that relocation. But we haven't really worked out at this point who should be. I do believe that for the portion of our training and for what we do for our public safety entities, that would become a general fund question for us as far as moving and relocating.
Or it may come out, sort of rob Peter, pay Paul, and may come out of the sheriff's budget, which we approve, and sheriff would have to build their budget to accommodate that, as well as perhaps a partnership with the city in terms of their budgetary process. So.
Right, so those are discussions that haven't happened yet, but absolutely. So if we budget it in the sheriff's department, it's basically coming out of the general fund, and in one way or another, we're all in that same pot together. But certainly, we should be talking to our partners once we have a better sense of the timing of that relocation. Obviously, if we're looking at putting the wastewater treatment there because of smell complaints or potential for smell versus visual, then the timeline for that probably gets moved up. If we're not moving the wastewater, then we have a little bit more flexibility in working on that.
Steve?
Similar to the wind anemometer test, how about doing a shooting range test? Get all the residents who complained about the shooting range noise to be outside at a given time have the same number of, same weapons, same number of rounds shot at the two locations or any other proposed locations, and have people see. I'd hate to spend a lot of effort moving the shooting range to a new location and have it not be any better location in terms of the sound coming out of it. And it'd be a simple thing to do for, you know, a half-hour test on a Saturday afternoon or something that people could vote on it or whatever.
It's worth thinking of something, but Rachel?
Yeah, I like the concept because I had written down acoustics, but I think that you can't really do that until it's considered to be how it's designed, because you can do berming, you can do a lot of things, and sound even changes depending on the temperature, you know, and how far sound travels and things like that as a form of energy. But I was just thinking, you know, as Michael and John had alluded to, it's worth a greater discussion, a greater work session on that single topic. It seems, though, that we need to jumpstart that process with a little bit of baseline information to kind of look at, well, what are the engineering standards, what are the minimum needs for, you know, distance between the thing, what is the appropriate, you know, backstop that catches the bullets and the safety factors, and then, you know, there may be, as separate from landfill grants, public safety grants for training purposes for these sort of things. Now that may have strings attached that we don't want to go forward if it has to be regional, and then suddenly we're the shooting range for Basalt and Carbondale and everywhere else. But I think we should at least allocate or give you time to think about how do we get some preliminary baseline information that what will it cost to move this, what are the minimum requirements. And, you know, I know that through DOW, now Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they had a program to enhance shooting range for the general public, but they also had different standards that tried to capture more of the noise now. And so, you know, is it, you know, we've talked, should it be semi-enclosed? Is it, you know, what? And even just for us to have an update of what are the kind of training schedules that the deputies must maintain in order to keep their certification up. I know there's a certain amount of night and twilight shooting that they do. Others, it's daytime, keeping their skill levels up, so we get some idea of the utilization that's going to be required. You know, we should be clear, this is not a shooting range that they just go up to have fun on Saturdays. You know, this is very much about keeping their skill level up and preparedness for public safety. But we need to have all the bits of the information put together so we really know. But I'd love to jumpstart the process, and then it'll give us a little better idea what is the best location for that, how we can mitigate noise there. You know, just putting it up in that corner, make it echo more. There was a fascinating NPR article just yesterday I was listening to about the different whispering walls where you can talk here and hear it 500 yards away. But also they had acoustic materials that dropped sound tremendously. And so they did experiments of popping a balloon on one of these whispering walls, and you could hear it for 60 seconds, and then popping the same balloon next to an acoustic wall that absorbs sounds, that doesn't bounce sound, and it was zero. You know, you didn't even sound like it sounded like someone dropping a pen, not a balloon popping. And so I just want to know what we can do to make it the best for the neighbors wherever they are.
Yeah, and one of the things I think we need, this is in the landfill master plan, I think, only as a function that it's located on landfill land. And so these are questions I think we should probably task the sheriff's department and, you know, their range officers with bringing back some of these standards, and we can figure out estimates. I'm a little concerned that the landfill staff probably,
Sure, it's not landfill. I'm clear on that.
So we can bring that back. I think we've heard direction to come back with a separate work session, and I think if we get law enforcement, frankly, we've been approached by multiple private interests who would like to partner on shooting facilities up there, which is a whole nother policy question for the board in the future.
And again, I think the direction is for staff to kind of bring back a small work session on the shooting range with all the pieces and parties that are involved.
Yeah.
All right, so in summary, solid waste center staff requests the board to give consent to the 5-year initiative as presented, give approval to begin the permit the landfill expansion, and then give approval to begin the RFP process to purchase compost equipment.
Rachel?
The one question I have to ask as we're reaching a close on this is, similar to Rob's comment earlier, now that we've really gotten these plans tightened up in many ways, have we given the private contractor an opportunity to place a competitive bid, or do we have a side-by-side? I mean, you know the numbers, and you've explained that you feel it'll be this saving for these reasons, but I just wonder now that, have they had a chance to say, oh, we could actually bring our costs down by $150,000, or we could lease purchase the equipment with you, or anything like that? It's just that we have a termination point with that contract and we can let it go, or?
So this is an additional, so the answer is no, we have not done a bid process on the composting. That has been an add-on agreement to our landfill contract, and so for this analysis, it's true we have not gone out and said, well, this is, do we want to bid? And we could probably bid out those services concurrently with equipment and give that opportunity. That would probably be a fair thing to do. But in getting to this point, we've just used our historical costs.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause it just seems before we make such a major and pretty permanent, I would say absolutely permanent shift in operation policy, it'd be nice to make sure that we've got apples to apples somewhere.
George?
2 questions. One, it was in the presentation, but we really didn't discuss it in terms of the single stream that we decided to go with and use a private contractor for that. That in itself will extend the landfill by X amount of time, won't it? Is that sort of as part of your overall lifetime of the landfill, taking into consideration that?
I haven't done any official calculations, but all indications that when you do switch to a single stream program, you receive 30% more recyclable material. The switch over with waste management handling it, there's additional materials that are going to be able to be collected, such as the milk cartons, the cereal box type of containers. So, yeah, it'll only benefit. However, we start looking at who uses the centers. It's really a small percentage of the population. Most people have a curbside or drop-off type service, but yeah, there's always hope that we can divert more materials, make it more convenient for residents that do use the centers.
And then regarding the grinder, if we were to look at just composting food waste from within the county, not accepting outside waste, would we still want to purchase that grinder?
I believe probably we get a good majority, probably more from outside of the county. But yeah, the whole goal is that we're pretty much at capacity with the limited amount of mixing we can do with that waste. If we get a grinder, we can accept more, like go out and market more to restaurants, the local grocery stores who currently aren't doing a lot of food waste composting. The big sell is that we take in food waste for composting at a lower rate than what it would be to dispose of as trash. So it would allow us to better increase that capacity, a good revenue stream, keeps it out of the landfill. And also we get hit with some big events every year. X Games, Food and Wine Festival. MRI handles that contract. They bring in loads and loads because they have huge waste diversion policies for those events. So allow us to handle those materials that come in, because all of a sudden you have a week-long event and blam, you get truckload after truckload of food waste and that compostable serveware that we just can't break down.
And George, the grinder is also used for wood waste as well. So food waste is a small component of the use of the grinder.
I'm in favor of moving forward, but I would like to just, because I don't think it's been fully answered, go back to Rachel's question and what was my question, which is, have we given the current contractors an opportunity to rebuttal this proposal, and what is that rebuttal? And, you know,
I think our answer to that, Rob, was that we could do an RFP and just make it transparent. I don't think, you know, necessarily, you know, in a process like this, you're going to get a whole lot out of discussion of having the contractor come up and talk about whether it makes sense to change.
Yeah, it should be a formal bid. I mean, it shouldn't be a...
We could do...
To compare against this proposal, we can...
But we do have a track record of what the costs have been, and I think our contractors worked well with us to try and provide as good a deal as possible, and I think with that assumption, we looked at the costs and thought that this was probably better bang for the buck. I don't know that we're going to see, you know, dramatic change, but it's certainly something. If you want to get a comparison, I think we could ask for do an RFP process and get a bid on it.
But it's not necessarily comparing apples and apples, because one comparison is us buying the equipment and doing the stuff itself. An RFP would be for someone to provide that service for us through multiple service providers. Because what we're proposing with the composting is that we buy the equipment and we do it ourselves. So you're saying that we would potentially be a bidder of that RFP internally. I mean, but what I'm trying to get at is the question that I'm asking is, what are the downsides? What might be unforeseen mistakes that we're making going forward with this? And quite often, those questions are best answered externally, not internally. Because you're not going to say, well, we don't have the confidence to do this. But somebody else might say, well, you don't really know this part of the business. And what I'm getting at is that when you ask yourself that question, you know, what are the downsides to this? Sometimes it's best to ask, you know, somebody else that question versus...
Well, I'm not... Are you proposing that we hire a consultant?
No, I'm not.
Can I try, Rob?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What I see is that we now have our proposal and our numbers and our long-range plan, and, you know, perhaps you reshape it a little just to be more readable, but what we see as the county as the benefits, the long-term ownership of the equipment, the equity accrued, you know, on and on. And that stands on its own. That's our proposal. That's what we're being asked to move forward with. And then you would go out for an RFP and say that this is you can say up front that Pickens County is considering taking in-house this program, but will entertain competitive bids. This is our proposal. Our numbers are available. They're public information. Mm-hmm. Can you beat them? Can you match them? Can you provide the same benefits or more? I don't know what the creativity of a private operator might come up with. They might say, we'll lease purchase the equipment, and almost like, we'll build you the building, you pay rent, and at the end of 10 years you own it. I mean, I don't know what they may or may not come up with, but it would give us an evaluation proposal, and we can list all the pros that we have and others. And this is the one thing I'd like to state, you know, for the record, where my thinking is on this, and it's not to disparage at any level the work that's gone into this. I think it's very sound. I think it's moving forward in a good direction. But just even a month ago when we met with Eagle County and they talked about all the money they'd invested in their solid waste center and thought the market and them going in that direction was going to be the right move. And then markets have changed. We're no longer taking our stuff to them. They're now having revenue issues. And I don't want to make a similar mistake or set of assumptions that Eagle County did, that this is always going to be the landscape. And so I just want one last kind of evaluation screening internally for myself as, is this the right move? It may very well be. I think and we've gotten it to a place where we really can do good comparisons and be able to come back with yours and Kathy's and Connie's analysis to say, net, all the proposals we got, we still think bringing it in-house in the county is the best move. Or, you know what, they surprised us, and this is a pretty good proposal, and, you know, whatever. That's what I'm thinking. Is our proposal is pretty solid, and then just see what else the market could match with, or
And
not.
And a worst-case scenario really hasn't been talked about all that much, that we purchase, $1.5 million worth of equipment, and all of a sudden, the business goes away, or the market goes away. If we're contracting with someone, well, I mean, there's a risk level to any potential increase in profitability, or, however you want to look at it, reduced costs, or, in terms of a government versus a business. But I think those things need to be weighed in making the decision like this. George?
It seems like what you're talking about is just one aspect of this master plan for the
Yes, it's
solid
just the
waste. Just the composting. And so with that, I don't really have any problem if you want to issue an RFP. They would have to do a 10-year plan as well, so we can understand how their costs would compare to ours over 10 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we would make a judgment of the risk level of one versus the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's similar to why do we have a fleet department that takes care of our own vehicles, purchase and take care of our own vehicles versus using that for a private contractor to do. There probably is some economies of scales over the long run for a public service such as what we're performing. So, but I'm comfortable with it. If someone wants to put forth that do the work and put a pencil to the paper on an RFP for a 10-year period, that's fine with me. Other than that, I'm supportive of this. I think there's still a few questions we need to answer. Some of those come back as policies. One is the shooting range, another is a question in terms of the wastewater, in terms of the excess fluids, and the third for me is the composting issue in terms of how large, how far out do we want to expand that outside the county, and is that really beneficial or not? So.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Oh, well, just to tag on George, I agree entirely with how you described it. For me, it's kind of like the decision we just made to go to a private company for single stream. And we used to do that in-house, but we evaluated that and said, no, going private is better. And now we have this to bring in-house, and, as you said, we've compared to old numbers, but now that we have this is our proposal, this is what it would cost us to bring it in-house, we should compare it to what the private sector would offer us as well, to make that final yes, because this is a more than a 10-year commitment. It's a 20-year commitment, and it's some millions of dollars up front with
That's a
all
good
combined,
comparison.
not just a single program.
Steve?
In general, I'm really in favor of all the way you propose things. I agree with all of you in terms of, what can the private contractor do? It might be more cost effective for us to have them continue to do some of it. I'm concerned, especially on the land expansion, about unforeseen potential costs from going into a higher level of the Title V level of potential for new regulations coming out or things that we have to do. But when I think about, even if we end up breaking even at the end of the 10-year period, we will be providing a better service to the community. And if the contingency eats up the whole, what we saw as 2 million potential profit or 1 million or whatever that we were going to be ahead, if the contingency ate all of that up, we still would have a better facility and be providing better service to the public. So I feel we're probably safe in proceeding on that expansion.
I'd like to add one thing. We talked about some policy decisions that are made on a year-to-year basis or should be made in the future.
But in some sort of master plan for the landfill, what I'd really like to see is an area with individual areas, the goals that are set out for those individual areas, and really some action plans to achieve those goals. You know, for instance, we talked about some of this today. The wastewater treatment plant. One of the goals is to make sure that septic tanks around the county are better maintained. So what are the action plans to achieve that? You know, each one of the areas in our landfill, whether it be our electronic recycling or you know, paint issues or whatever, you know, what are the goals and how do we achieve those goals, so that when we look at our tipping fees or our, you know, our total budget for the next year, as we do on a yearly basis, we can really look at those goals in developing where we're going with the landfill.
A strategic plan.
A strategic plan for the landfill, exactly. So, I mean, why are we doing compost? You know, what is the benefit to the community that we're adding there? What are the list of goals? And how do we create policy to achieve those goals? Rachel?
Yeah, I was going to say, I really like that. It's kind of funny, when we do a master plan for land use, we always have the objectives and how it's going to save community character or do this.
Yeah.
And so just to have the objectives of these investments makes sense. Which reminds me of something. We've never had, to my mind, much of an effective marketing plan for the recycling programs. And now that we're going to single stream, we're going to see the potential of more. But, you know, there should be some allocated budget for really educating the public about that program, and then ongoing marketing of that, which I've seen when I've been in Boulder County and other areas where they really have nice, friendly, feel-good ads to the public, and, you know, what can't be accepted now and what is, and how you don't have to mix it. And so I think that along with the master plan should be a component, which is the marketing for the usage of this. Similar to marking of the septic. And then the last is, it may or may not pan out, but, you know, Tom Dunlap, as our voluntary public health official, has had his finger on the pulse of so many of these environmental issues. He might have some idea of anything that he sees coming down the pike for Title V landfills, you know, and so he might be a resource for us to ask to investigate that. He did so much work, of course, with Smuggler, and still does as our agent on those EPA things. But we could ask him and see if he sees any other bigger hurdles, or they may be imposing, or they've been talking about imposing on Title V landfills.
Any other wrap-up? I think we've given some good direction. We've got some decision things later today. So there'll probably be some continued discussion.
Are you okay with the direction,
regarding
Michael? I didn't hear you nod off. Or
anything you want to add, Michael?
No, I'm fine.
So can I just
Yes.
get clarification? So consent for the 5-year initiative. We have approval to go with the permitting for a landfill expansion, get some input from Tom on Title V. And with regard to the RFP of purchase of compost equipment, I'm hearing the board would like to see an RFP for general composting services,
Yeah.
just to see how we line up with costs there. Is that before we RFP for the equipment itself?
Given the fact that we've put together
Just trying to get
our
clarification on
10-year
timing.
plan, we'd like to put out some sort of RFP for the services to compare to our 10-year plan.
And I think as part of that, we could RFP the equipment as part of
To
our
get a good
bid
cost.
To get a good cost as
Yeah.
well. Do it simultaneously.
Yeah.
Great.
very good.
Thank you, everybody. It is 2:58. We're a little bit early, but good timing on however John plans that out for it to be a 2-hour meeting. It's worked real
Works out
well.
once a year.
We've got scheduled a 15-minute break, so why don't we return here at 3:15 for the rest of our agenda.
Great. Thank you.
Moving into memos of interest. Our first two memos of interest have to do with the landfill as well. And Kathy, I don't know if you want to come back up and
Yeah,
give us
Rob.
and John can give us an introduction. And
If you don't mind me jumping in, I think given the discussion that we just had, particularly around composting and the direction from the board to kind of do a dual route of putting proposals out, that right now maybe we should wait on that budget supplemental until we bring back that information that the board's requested, but go ahead and move forward with the single stream, which was direction already given to us by the board.
Okay, so there was a supplemental budget for a composting, waste composting center. So we'll push that down the road for more information, and we'll move on to the second supplemental budget, which is a single stream recycling privatization budget.
Okay. And as you're all aware, we went out with an RFP process in December-ish to privatize the 4 collection centers we have: Aspen, Rio Grande, Basalt, Redstone, as well as the drop-off at the Solid Waste Center. Waste Management Incorporated came back as the winning bidder. We have their prices, and we are gearing up to finalize the contract and make the switch over in the next few weeks, hopefully. And we've done the supplemental here.
The supplemental is a net zero. It's just a transfer of budget from lines where we will have savings because we are not doing it ourselves into the specific line item for the recycling contractor.
Any questions? Nod of heads to move forward with this supplemental budget. We talked about it in great detail in our previous meeting, so looks like we have authority to move forward with that.
Okay, great.
Just
Yeah.
just a little commentary. I was putting my white paper in the Basalt Collection Center the other day, and right in there was some brown paper bag stuff was in there. And I was wondering, what happens to this load of white paper? Is it considered contaminated? But if it was a single stream thing,
It wouldn't, yeah.
it all goes, would be
together
acceptable,
anyways,
and it
right.
doesn't matter if it's mixed in. So I have a feeling we're going to have less contaminated loads doing the single stream thing, and then that's good.
Absolutely, yeah, because like you said, we're constantly cleaning those bins, and sometimes we have to trash them, so.
Great, thank you. The next item on our memos of interest is a budget supplemental for from the Healthy Rivers and Stream Fund. I don't know if John's here. Is Lisa?
Lisa's was just here. There she is.
Lisa, if you want to give us an overview of this one.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lisa McDonald with the County Attorney's Office, and I am also one of the staff liaisons for the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. Here with me this afternoon is Mark Fuller. He is the Executive Director with Rudai Water and Power Authority. In front of you today is a budget supplemental request for Rudai Water and Power Authority for $10,000 to go towards this is a tongue twister for me, the Aquatic Nuisance Species Inspection Program at Rudai Reservoir for 2014. Funding for the program was recently eliminated by the U.S. Forest Service in the state of Colorado, so RUWAPA is attempting to gather funds for the 2014 program. The inspection program is intended to educate the public and also ensure that no invasive species are introduced into our local waterways. We have supported the program since its inception, I think in 2010, and I can let Mark take over from here, or if you have any further questions, he can probably handle those for you.
George?
So it sounds like this is going to be sort of an annual challenge for you, Mark, in terms of getting continuing funding, which is, I think, is a very important program for Rudai. But given that the state has pulled out and some of these other sources, unless you think they may have a chance of coming back in under some other way, funding.
I think there's a chance of that. Basically what we're trying to do this year is put something in place for this year so we can give ourselves a few months to find that long-term source. And we've started discussions with the state. I think there's a chance that the Department of Parks and Wildlife will be able to come up with some annual contributions. Forest Service, I don't know about, but we're basically going to spend the next 10 months trying to figure out what we do from here on out, so that we don't have to come back every year and scramble for money.
Steve?
Mark, has, in the previous years, how long have the boats been being inspected and cleaned at Rudine?
We started the program in 2010, and it started as a weekend program, and it's been gradually expanding.
And do you have any data on like how many boats with the invasive species being on them were found during that time?
We haven't found any boats with adult mussels. We've found numbers of boats. I can't give you an exact figure, but it's probably around 100 over the last 4 years that have needed to be cleaned because they came in with standing water and might be carriers of larval mussels. Anything that comes in that's not completely drained and dry is a candidate for cleaning. So we probably do 15 or 20 of those a year or more. But we haven't found any adult mussels on any of the boats coming in.
Okay. And did other lower elevation lakes around the state, what sort of numbers, do you have any idea of the numbers of contaminated boats that they're getting?
I don't have numbers of contaminated boats. I can tell you that larval mussels have been found in a number of reservoirs around the state, including Blue Mesa and Pueblo Reservoir and Horsetooth and a couple of other Front Range reservoirs. So they are in the state, and they are in reservoirs that are within easy sort of shooting distance of us, and they're in Lake Powell, which obviously is a big source for boats that come up here as well. So we're kind of surrounded. The science is still inconclusive about whether or not there's any kind of natural barrier to these animals in terms of altitude or temperature or water chemistry. So we can't say that we're immune. Although I don't believe that there are any reservoirs in the state of Colorado where adult mussels have become established. So they're sort of a fringe threat in Colorado.
Would that be a reason why the Forest Service and the Division of Parks and Wildlife decided to not fund it?
I don't think so. The state is funding a number of reservoirs, inspection programs, and a number of reservoirs that have state connections. In other words, like at state parks. The Rudine is a federal reservoir, so I think that's why it fell off the list. In my discussions with both the state and the Forest Service, they've indicated it was strictly a budgetary issue.
Okay.
I'm in favor of moving forward with this. I would just ask, in the way that this is laid out, that we've already appropriated $150,000 towards grants in open and Rivers and Streams, Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund. And this is $10,000 out of that. And if I recall correctly, in some of our joint meetings with Healthy Rivers and Streams, we've kind of asked for a little bit more of a system for when we're allocating our grant money. I don't know if anybody else recalls
a scoring criteria.
A scoring criteria that they would bring when we do these things. Well, we don't have a grant process like we do with the Healthy Community Fund, where everybody puts in for a grant. It's kind of an ongoing thing.
so we can judge grants against each other in that. And we've had this discussion with the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, where we felt that they at least need to present us their recommendation with some sort of scoring criteria, that it meets the goals of the Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund. It just seems to me like I think we've asked for this a couple of times, and I don't think it's ever really developed. So I think it's something just moving forward that we need to get a little bit more direction from that board.
Right.
George?
I was going to say, and it may have been the shorthand of the memo. Are you saying, Lisa, that they did score it?
Yes.
Yeah, so they used that process, but it's the shorthand of the memo that just says they voted to approve.
Well, actually, in the memo, it does say the
does
funding
say
request
they
was
scored.
scored and met the board's grant protocol guidelines for review. So maybe, Rob, maybe all we really need to see is just
What
like a
that
copy of
scoring
that.
is.
Physical, yeah.
Yeah.
Or a
That's
summary.
I guess what I'm saying, yeah.
So just attach that to the supplemental.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to move it forward.
Everybody want to move forward with this? Sounds good? Sounds good. Thank you. Mark, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Rob?
Yes.
I'd like to take just a moment to thank Mark Fuller for his years of participation with the 1177 roundtables. I saw him just yesterday down in Glenwood Springs. I think it's a state appointment, and has just been someone who's really watching our water supplies, and really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mark. Next on our memos of interest is the 2013 West of Maroon Plan update. Alan Sassano's here to present on that, and Cindy.
Thank you, Rob. So no action is requested or required of the board on this item. The West of Maroon Creek Plan, also known as the WAMP, as you know, was adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission in October of 2013. And we added this to your agenda to follow up on how recommendations made by the board to the P&Z regarding the WAMP were ultimately incorporated into the final draft that was adopted. A handful of details regarding changes were included in your memo. I'm not going to cover those unless you have specific questions. The only real pivotal change made to the plan was removal of any reference to joint adoption by both the City of Aspen and the county. Based on input from city staff and to some extent the board, the Planning Commission reframed recommendations regarding property within the city to make it clear that they were recommendations only, made in the spirit of planning comprehensively and cooperatively for the area, with the hope that the city may at some point consider adopting all or parts of the plan on its own. In terms of where we go from here, ultimately you will be weighing in on any of the plan recommendations that require land use code amendments. They will be subject to review by the Planning Commission in public hearings, and you will have the ultimate say and adoption authority on those code amendments. So that's really all I have in terms of an introduction. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about some of the details that we listed in the plan, in the memorandum regarding the plan changes that were made. Anything?
Rachel?
Yeah, I would just like to comment that I appreciated the way you found the appropriate wording to accommodate some of the concerns that the board had made, particularly the airport purchase lands and things like that. And I think it's good, and I know you have done thank yous to the P&Z for that, and I've wondered whether we could craft a letter from the board of thank you for your extra hours and time that's been appreciated in putting in together this plan.
Yeah, that would be.
We'd love to do. I'd like us to do that.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. And yeah, good idea. Anything else?
Steve?
I was curious about the 20-acre parcel that's across from the airport that was purchased with FAA funds. And maybe this, I think this has to do with WOMP, but would the FAA and the airport be bound by what WOMP recommendation is? If the airport decided to expand into that area with some facilities, that would be going against what WOMP has said, and because it's FAA funding, maybe our hands are tied on that. I'm just curious.
Well, so there's a number of dimensions, I think, to answering that question. One, you as the board are the project sponsors, and so particularly as it relates to the terminal building in particular, that is something that would be initiated and very much controlled by the board. And so, we have because we are a public entity, we're under a locations and extent review process, and so the Western Maroon Creek plan would govern the P&Z's recommendations on any development at the airport. If the P&Z found that the development was in agreement with the WOMP, they would give approval. You have the opportunity to move forward. If the Planning and Zoning Committee were to determine that certain elements of that plan were not in conformance with the Western Maroon Creek plan, it would actually come back to you as a governing board to make a decision about whether to move forward or not. So ultimately, that decision, particularly as it relates to the terminal building and those developments, really rests with you, and the locations and extent process gives you that authority. And you have it two places, because you determine the nature of the project that's coming forward ultimately, and you would ultimately be the approving body. If that, I know it's a little complicated, but that's, I think, how the mechanics would work.
But to the extent that the plan has already had some influence on airport activity, we can say that, yes, it has influenced the design guidelines that we don't believe they've been adopted yet, but they're still underway, and fortunately, they did take into consideration several aspects of recommendations from the law.
Okay. Any other question? Michael?
Ellen, could you talk about the transportation district? I don't remember participating in that. I don't remember anything about that.
Yeah, if my memory serves me right, it's just an action item recommendation that would be explored to see whether or not a transportation district in the area, the planning area of the Western Maroon Creek plan would make some sense. We have several items from the entrance to Aspen that have never really fully been addressed. We have several transportation related upcoming improvement projects with I never get it right, the access control plan, which came before you earlier, I think it was late last year, looking at some new directional signals along the highway, looking at a few of the bus stop locations as they relate to sidewalk improvements or underpass improvements, and how that relates to some of the recommendations that came out of the plan to make access easier between Buttermilk and, say, the old bridge location further up valley on the south side of the highway there. So it's all related, and whether or not a transportation district makes any sense there versus just use of various transportation funds that we have already in place.
So this would be a taxing district, is that what?
Potentially.
Yeah. So Michael, particularly counties back in 2002 were given the ability to create what's called public improvement districts. And the public improvement districts can fund all services that counties are authorized to provide. And in addition, I believe they can do fire, water, and water, which, you know, counties can do wastewater already. And so there are a number of counties in the state now that have looked at if there are kind of suburban type areas in unincorporated parts of the county, oftentimes the infrastructure needs and service needs of those areas are greater than what you find in the rural areas. And the districts have been used by those counties to kind of even out that differential between service demand and revenue generation. I don't think there's been any analysis at this point to, you know, make any judgment about whether that's appropriate for, you know, the Western Maroon Creek plan, but it was a action item that came out as, hey, this is kind of developing into more of a suburban level of development that may require more in the way of pedestrian, bicycle, vehicle type traffic amenities that may be at a higher cost than what you typically have in rural areas and at rural densities. It's a fairly common tool, and when they get implemented, typically they're a dependent kind of special district, which means the board of the special district is the Board of County Commissioners sitting ex officio, similar to what you do with the ambulance district. And then the funds are segregated. They can collect property tax and what's called a facility improvement fee, which operates like a sales tax. Those funds then get collected and are accounted for separately, but tend to be administered with existing county staff. So that's kind of the details of what the possibilities are.
And there wasn't any goals listed with this, it's just
No, it's really just in general the capital improvements that are listed throughout the plan as far as sidewalks, underpasses, safer pedestrian crossings, that sort of thing. There's, you know, you could put all those together kind of in the design element and say there's going to be a need for some funding. So that was just one potential funding source.
The road improvement plan for the ABC is just another example of activity in that area relating to the need to improve transportation elements.
Other questions? Thanks for the update. Next on our agenda is future agendas.
Yeah, and I don't have a whole lot for you. I just wanted to note, next week, right now our agenda is very light. Rachel is not going to be here. We do have several executive session items to discuss. I was also going to propose, and Rachel, maybe we can talk about this offline, just having a brief work session to talk about our retreat and talking about our agenda for that. We have some ideas to put in front of you. But potentially just moving everything then into the afternoon and having a shorter meeting that day. That's okay.
Fine by me. And yeah, I'll try to talk with you and John Ely to give any input to the executive session item.
Okay. So that's all I really had on future agendas at this point.
Anybody else?
I have a question, John. On Tuesday, February 25th, we have a half hour slotted for Aspen Airport Design Guidelines. Seems like a short time frame.
I think that was supposed to come off, to be honest with you. And let me double check that, because we had some dates bookmarked there. Did you say the 24th or 25th?
25th of February.
So I'll double check that, but I do not believe, unless it's, we're just bookmarking a little bit of time to give you an update on the open house.
Additional comments on anything on our agendas coming up?
Just for everyone's information, on Wednesday, February 20th, there's an event at CCI in Denver, at the CCI building, and it's a water meeting, and Rachel and I are both going to be there, and it's sponsored, I guess it's sponsored by Colorado Mesa.
Colorado Mesa University's
University.
Water Center, as well as
Has put
others.
this together, but it's, Gail Schwartz is going to be there and different representatives and water interest people, so, and the topic has to do with land use issues and water use.
Yeah, just to elaborate, since you brought it up, when you talk about the Colorado Water Plan, the big stone wall seems to be the issue of local control. We all want local control versus, but if we really want to save ag and conserve water, maybe we should have some best practices and standards towards density and outside irrigation and land use in general. And so the water plan currently doesn't touch land use and rate of growth and all these matters. And from having sat through those way back when Harris Sherman was Department of Natural Resources here in Colorado, and they kept saying, oh, don't worry, land use will be in the conservation section, but it's just such a third rail of Colorado politics. So I think that this is an attempt to start, the water providers will tell you, hey, don't talk to us. Our job is to put water in the pipes, Whether that city decides that it wants to grow to 400,000 or 200,000 or 20,000, our job is to put water in the pipes and to try to start bringing the other elected officials into awareness that your own choices are what is drying up the agriculture business and the economy in your backyard or this or that. So it's just an attempt to try to start that dialogue. It's very strongly resisted, let me put it that way, within the state.
Anything else on future agendas?
No.
Move to open discussion. Do you have anything, John, first that you want to?
I've got a few items. I asked Brian to come. We can start with this. There was an article the other day in the Aspen Daily News regarding the liquidated damages. I think it had a little bit of a misleading headline, so we wanted to go ahead and have an opportunity, one, to just clarify how that process moves forward, and then answer any questions that the board might have. So,
And give the Daily News some credit, they did run a correction today, but the title of the article was misleading. Flatiron is being completely cooperative in this negotiation of liquidated damages. And having gone through other construction projects that had delays, many times you don't get all the liquidated damages that are listed in your contract. You get something less than that, but something more than your actual damages. So right now what we're doing with Flatiron is determining exactly what the amount of liquidated damages are and exactly what our actual damages are. And then we're going to be getting together over the next couple months and deciding where we fall in between those two bookends of costs. And Flatiron is, they're admitting they caused delay. This is mostly their fault because of inadequate resources and inadequate management of that job initially. So it's going well.
Brian, can you define those two terms, liquidated damages and actual damages?
Yeah. So LDs, or liquidated damages, are what are listed contractually in the document that RAFTA and Flatiron signed.
Hence,
And they are determined on a daily delay, in this case $3,900 a day, and liquidated damages are assessed per day of delay. So it's a contractual number that is agreed upon once you sign the contract. The actual damages are things like the additional costs of engineering and inspection, and traffic control is a big one on this project. All those are actual damages that RAFTA and the county incurred because the project was delayed. And usually you make sure your liquidated damages are enough to cover any actual damages that you would incur, and in this case we have, plus some.
the cost of the snow removal, the cost of the lighting, the structures that were out there.
Yeah. Administration, yes.
Administration. And I read the article too. The first thing that I thought of is, can you calculate, or in a contract like this, would you calculate the damages to the community?
The inconvenience.
The inconvenience, the 10 minutes extra it took everybody to get to work for X number of days or whatever, to make an argument to say, well, these are damages to our economic environment here.
You certainly could calculate it. Whether it comes out positively in a negotiated setting or not is another question. I think what we're looking at right now is making sure that the county and RAFTA are kept whole from a financial standpoint. What money did we actually have to spend due to the delay of the project?
And I understand that it's a negotiation, and in the end, you really don't want to spend more time than it's worth to come up with a dollar of value, but I think it's worth merit to say that those dollars that we spent on their contract were paid by our citizens. So it's not just making Pickens County whole, but it's making our citizens whole for the dollars that they've supported through taxes or whatnot, and they saw some inconveniences. So, you know, it might bump that actual damage number in the final settlement just a little bit higher.
That's a good point. It's something we'll bring up.
George?
We had in the original budget, or the last approved budget, we had a contingency amount because we didn't know what sort of unknowns may happen. How do we make out? Is it too early to
Well,
do?
it's too early, but I will say that we did have some design issues where we needed to go back and look at design and materials issues associated with that. So we have been using that contingency. But my understanding at this point is we have every reason to believe we'll be on budget.
Yes, absolutely.
Other questions regarding that? Can you give us this, well, I was going to ask, can you give us a status update of where we are today with the finishing of the snow melt, the lights, the other aspects? Are we just waiting until spring to finish those things up, or are some of that still moving forward?
That is still, electricians are still working on the snow melt and the lighting right now and hooking them up to make sure that they're functional. They are currently not functional, and Flatiron is providing snow removal to and from the tunnel. Once the snow melts in the springtime, then Flatiron will gear up again to stain the concrete, put the landscaping in, and put the final touches on the station itself. So this has been an incredible snow year, and removing snow from that site's been a challenge.
I did notice on my last trip to the airport that the sign that says no crossing at the crosswalk was covered with snow plow splatter. And that was addressed as a major safety concern, that people didn't continue to use the old pedestrian crossing there. And I wonder if you might just mention it to the people that are doing the snow removal to make sure that that safety sign that says don't use this crossing remains clear of debris.
We'll make sure that's fixed. That needs to be fixed if that's the case.
Rachel?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with your point about the general inconvenience, and that should be something that, to the extent possible, beyond RAFTA being whole and the county being whole for extra expense from these liquidated damages, because it's something that, I'd like to see reinvested in our road fund and then benefit our residents wherever, it ends up being applied, whether it's a resurfacing or, sometimes very small amounts help finish a project or help us upgrade the thickness of a project or something like that. Because throughout the summer, we kind of all kept saying, these guys aren't doing this. And it took a long time for them to truly respond. And it's going to finish out nice, and I know that. But I'd just like to second the inconvenience factor, that it'd be nice to be able to turn back to our people to say, for all those lines and those extra time periods of delays, there's something to be shown for the county's bottom line through the road budget. The other thing is that, and I know you're aware, I've received kind of citizen concerns about the crossing, since you raised it, Rob. And the concerns were that the snow removal has not been that good yet during these blizzards. It happens to everyone, but still, without the snow melt in place and without snow removal, that people are crossing at grade because they actually feel it's safer. And that it's not, fully operational yet, and they're concerned about being in the tunnel and people working up on the tunnel and dropping tools or materials falling and, so on and so forth. And, I don't know how valid that is. I just forwarded those concerns to Brian Forward, but the citizen was kind of asking, you should keep the crosswalk at grade a little longer until you really have a big grand open and it's not just all sawhorses and avalanche netting and things like that directing people in this direction. I do think the vast majority of the people are already using it and feel it's safer, but I've just wondered when we go from a soft to a hard opening, or is it worth asking these contractors, maybe it's part of the way they make up their liquidated damages, is you guys should have some personnel out there directing people, saying hi, be sure to use this, doing something to make sure that people know it's open, it's safe. And, I'm not suggesting our own personnel do that, but maybe that's part of what we could ask that contractor to do, because we're just having, we were not able to open it the way we should have from the day one, and safety is a concern. So, people are kind of going back and forth who work either at the airport or the business center about which they should really use right now.
Okay. Thoughts, comments? Thank you for the update, Brian.
Yeah,
Appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.
Additional open discussion?
Just a couple quick updates. Last night, the city council did approve an easement for the library out to that 60 feet, and I know there's already a pre-bid meeting talking about design, so that's moving forward very quickly, and it sounds like that's on the right track. I do not know the details. We had some concerns about some of the language. I think that got worked out, but we will be looking into that and check in with you, but it looks like that's moving forward well. And then
Can I comment on that before you
Yeah.
jump ahead? It seems that maybe start fitting in some future agenda updates or meetings on that, just so that we have time
the library.
reserved for things as they come out.
Okay, that's a good idea. And then good news, we finally got our last December sales tax report in, and we finished the year 6.9% up over 2012. And you'll recall that we had a budget of anticipating about a 3% increase, so we did well. That's it.
Rachel?
I think we may have all gotten the email already, but for public discussion, the Independence Pass bill did make it out of appropriations.
Yes.
Okay, and so we don't know when it's going to be scheduled yet for the Senate subcommittee meetings, but we will have to have some people down there to testify for that.
I kid you not, I have an email that just popped up from Diane Mitch Bush.
Okay.
And it looks like they are getting ready to schedule it for Senate committee hearings.
Okay.
So they're going to be asking us to go back down. We do not have a date yet, but my guess is it's going to come up pretty quick,
Yeah,
maybe in
it'll
the
be
next week or so.
Fast and furious when it does.
Would that be a Senate Transportation Committee then, would be the one to first look at it?
Yeah, it'll be Senate Transportation Committee, and if it passes out of that without amendment, then it go to the Senate for a final vote. So,
Does it need a final House vote too?
I
Now they
think
came
it
out of
came
appropriations.
through- I think it came out of the House already. They had a House
Once it came
vote
out of
on it
appropriations.
Once it came out of appropriations. And so my belief is we go to Senate Transportation. If it's not revised there to where it'd have to go to a joint committee, then it'd go to a vote of the Senate and then signature. So.
Any commissioner comments in open discussion? Rachel?
I had one other thing. I was thinking about, in today's paper, I've thought about this before, but it also has the story, the Aspen City Council approves more affordable housing at Burlingame. They've, completed some, and they're going to move forward with some. To the extent the board would like to, I was wondering if John might be able to talk to Steve Barwick and see if there's a time to potentially have a site visit before those new units are occupied, so that we could have a chance to see inside, what they're building, we're a joint housing office through the Housing Authority, but you don't often get a chance to totally new construction, the livability, the sizes. It gives us a good point of comparison, and to the extent that they can give us, their hard construction numbers. I know it gets confusing when you try to say land costs and, infrastructure and stuff, but as we've been looking at partnerships with others, and even at the table discussing sizes and unit sizes and livability, it might be a great opportunity to see some new affordable housing units. And I myself would enjoy the site visit. It's not too far to go if they can line that up.
I'd like that. I'm proud to say I've got 2 employees, one that just closed and one that's about to close on Burlingame units.
Nice. Would others be interested in seeing that so we can then evaluate our other public-private partnerships?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, we can ask him for a site visit.
Anything else?
Not today.
Well, grassroots, that's it for today. Thank you very much. I'll adjourn the work session today.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks.
This worked out well. Molly's got the stomach.